Welcome, everybody, to another solo chat with Chase. This is, in theory, episode number 11, but in reality, at least in my mind and hopefully your hearts, episode number 12 of the Always On podcast, show, spectacular, whatever you want to call this. Unfortunately, Reed Carter could not be here tonight. He's had some personal family matters pop up in the last week. That's why Tuesday's show is now, in theory, Thursday's show, and we're doing a solo podcast here tonight. So obviously, all thoughts going out to Reed Carter and his family, things that are going on with him. If he wants to discuss them, he may when he comes back on. But unfortunately, some of the realities of life are starting to rear their ugly head for some of the personal family members of the Carter organization or the Carter family. We wish everybody there well. And with that said, hopefully you enjoy this little solo chat with me, myself, Chase, the great. I don't know if I'm that great, but I like to at least say that. So that being said, let's get to where we were going to go on Tuesday, which is a little bit of Super Bowl 57 recap. We had a spectacular game against the Chiefs and Eagles, a 6:30 kickoff on Fox. Everything you wanted happened this game. Special teams, major special teams, successes, turnovers, controversial calls, two quarterbacks doing their absolute best for a team to put their team on their back. So that being said, we get into it. Let's just break down the gambling a little bit because anyone remembers, I actually nailed this game in my prediction. It ended up being a 38-35 final. That's exactly what I predicted, a 38-35 final. I did think it might have come down to a last-minute field goal when Reed was picking my brain on it, but I honestly thought it might come earlier in the game. Little did I know it would come down exactly to a last-second field goal, just be an utter stunner of a game. I think it was 113 million people watched it, making it the third most watched Super Bowl of all time, putting it in, I believe, the top 5, if I'm not mistaken, or top 3 most watched just U.S. telecasts ever. To no one's surprise, 9 of the top 10 most watched telecasts or TV shows, however you want to describe it, ever have been Super Bowls. Not a shock. What did shock me, though, was I believe it was number 9, the 9th most watched episode in U.S. TV history was a true blue television show. It was the finale of a show that most people my age, even a little bit older and definitely younger, maybe you've heard of, but sure as heck don't remember, MASH. MASH. It drew a astounding, I believe it was 106 million viewers. Utterly insane. Just goes to show, I never realized how popular that show was until I saw that stat. But let's pivot back to the Super Bowl. 113 million apparently, and let me share this with you guys. Apparently, the Rihanna halftime show, which I did not watch, the Rihanna halftime show got a whopping 100 and I believe 19 million. Oh, no, excuse me, 118.7. Look at that. That's astounding. 118.7 million people. So, what, a 5 million person increase to watch Rihanna instead of watch the game. I understand more people have an appreciation for music than they do necessarily the sporting event that is football and the Super Bowl. I don't know. I believe that's only happened one other time, and it might have been Katy Perry's, potentially even Michael Jackson's Super Bowl performance. But that was crazy to me. I don't know how they do that. If it's potentially you get more viewers once people get home from other people's Super Bowl parties and are tuning in. That was my only real speculation. But you would think that would then translate to the second half of the Super Bowl. So I don't know. My only speculation is that potentially it was people coming home from parties because obviously you got to work the next day. Speaking of which, a little sidebar. We need Super Bowl Monday, as I think a lot of people call it, to be a holiday. If there's some racist holiday out here in America that people want to get rid of, I think in Tennessee they are trying to switch Columbus Day to being Super Bowl Monday, just doing a little flip-flop saying that's a day off. I would be all about it. That way you can get yourself really into the game, have some fun, and not have to worry about going to work the next day. That would be a great little just time-honored tradition. In 100 years, will football still be as popular as it is today? I don't know, but let's let this thing ride. Because 100 years ago, who would have thought Columbus would have been as popular as or unpopular as he is today? So I say we let it ride. I think that would be a decent compromise. Nothing against Columbus, at least not on my end. I would be very happy to have that switch so I could get a little more lubricated, let's say, during the Super Bowl and have myself some fun, not worry about the repercussions the next day. But I thought that was fascinating that Rihanna got 118.7 million people to tune in versus the Super Bowl's 113. Can't say I'm necessarily some massive fan of Rihanna. Does she have some good songs? Sure, I liked it. Apparently, she came out as pregnant. I honestly, and I swear to God, I did not watch this halftime show. I actually ran to a convenience store, did a little walk in there to get a little exercise in. As you can tell, I need it. So I didn't watch it. TV was on, so I guess I counted in this number here. But impressive nonetheless. It goes to show the power of her music and the power of her personality, because I just didn't realize Rihanna was that much of a draw. Apparently, it was her first performance in several years, too. So you got that little excitement going on as well. A fun little caveat just to, I guess, stick the knife in. I don't know. Apparently, she said she was never going to perform in a Super Bowl when the whole Colin Kaepernick thing was going on. Whatever you feel about that. And Colin Kaepernick, just for people who may not be aware, was the former NFL quarterback who took a knee on the field during the national anthem, caused a big stir. She apparently said she was never going to do another Super Bowl again. Seems like that wasn't true. Neither here nor there. I thought that was just a fun little fact that, there's a little bit of hypocritical stuff going on there. But what was not hypocritical is this game. This game was unbelievable. Let's just get to the gambling stats real quick. Again, like I said, it was 38-35 final score. The over-under was 51. Over hit, I believe, if I'm doing the math right, that's 70. So like 74 points were scored. Very good game. Or excuse me, I think it's 73 points were scored. The Eagles were predicted, at least by the time we had this, the Eagles were predicted to win by 1.5 points. I'm trying to look up real quick just to see if I can't find what that ended up being here at the end. I should. Okay, it stayed 1.5 at the final tally there too. So the Chiefs obviously did not cover. Money line's money line. No one cares about that. But the game started off hot, man. I got to say, Jalen Hurts takes a team down the field. They score 1 yard. He scores a 1 yard touchdown run. They come right back. The Kansas City Chiefs do, with a dynamic duo that is Kelsey and Mahomes. They score an 18-yard touchdown pass. Mahomes obviously doing his magic. Then the Eagles sort of take over the second quarter. In the second quarter, you had an A.J. Brown 45-yard touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts, clearly. Hurts had a very good game for himself. Hurts threw for over 300 yards, just barely, I believe. Let me look here. It was 304 yards. He did have a touchdown, and Patrick Mahomes only threw for 182. So there was a little bit of a disparity there. Looking at the game, it seemed like Patrick would have been over at least 200 yards, but apparently he wasn't. He did throw 3 touchdowns, though. And when you think about it, as we get into the third and fourth quarter, he did have some short fields to go with, especially in the fourth quarter, which we'll get to here in a second. As we get to that second quarter, though, the Eagles Eagles scored, started off. So we're sitting here now at 14-7. Then Chiefs march right back down the field, Chiefs don't march down the field. They go 3 and out, then punt it away. Hurts has a pretty big fumble that is picked up and returned by Nick Bolton, 36-yard fumble return. Almost happened twice in this game. Not from Hurts' fumble, but Nick Bolton almost had 2 fumble recoveries for touchdowns. If you're going to say it was controversial that this holding call that comes at the end of the game, well, then this fumble recovery that he didn't get for a touchdown may just as well be controversial, because I know it's the whole football move, yada, 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 but it looked like that receiver clearly had possession, and I was gunning for the Chiefs. I predicted the Chiefs to win, so maybe it's my own bias coming in here. But either way, Nick Bolton takes that thing to the hizzy. Huge touchdown, obviously ties the game up. But then the the Eagles go on for a 12-play, 75-yard touchdown drive, bring themselves up 21-14 with 2 minutes, 20 seconds left to go. Then they get the ball back before the half, have an 8-play, 40-yard drive for a minute 22. So as you can tell, the Chiefs had a pretty quick 3-and-out there. They get a field goal to go up 24-14. Looking like there was a potential for the Chiefs, to completely just fumble this one away. I know Mahomes came up a little gimpy one play. Obviously, some repercussions from his high ankle sprain a couple of weeks ago. Either way, the Chiefs came out in the second half and just utterly dominated. They never had the ball where they didn't score at least a touchdown, or at least score points, because they didn't score a touchdown on the last drive. Third quarter, Isaiah Pacheco goes wild. He has a 1-yard run, 10-play, 75-yard drive, ellipsed 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Chiefs then give the ball back to Philly. Philly gets a field goal. So right now we're sitting here at the end of the third quarter. It's 27-21, Philly leading. Then you get into the fourth quarter, and this is where championships are won. And this is why the Chiefs showed why they are the champions. They dominated the fourth quarter. They had 3 scores, 2 touchdowns, and 1 field goal to the Eagles' 1 touchdown. You start off the fourth quarter with a pretty sick little pass to Kadarius Toney. It was sort of a motion where, if you think of it, they just did sort of a flat route, but they bring him in motion, bust him right back out to the sideline as they get to the goal line. Dump off pass, walk-in touchdown, Kadarius Toney. Then the very next drive, Eagles, I don't think they went 3-and-out, but they didn't produce anything. Then they get the ball back with 9 minutes and 22 seconds left. They march down get a 3-play drive, because this 3-play drive was where Kadarius Toney, speaking of the devil, had the longest return punt in Super Bowl history. Almost took it to the house. Looked like he would have, because from me just seeing him as a Florida Gator, when he was trailing up that sideline and there was only a couple more defenders he's hugging the sideline around this 5-6 yard line, looked like he easily could have busted it back into the open field and gotten himself sneakily into the end zone. But he didn't do it. He tried, but he wasn't able to make it successful. He did have a pretty sweet little move when he caught that punt, though. Went down from our vantage point as the viewer, went down the left side of the field and somehow eluded a tackler. I have no idea how he did it. It was utterly impressive. Goes to show that guy has got tendons of titanium or of just rubber. I don't know. These things, how he has intact his MCL, ACL, and PCL is, I think, beyond anyone in the medical profession or just planet Earth, because this dude has moved, honestly, like I've never seen. And he's just sweetness when it comes to how much he can, juck and jive type of stuff. But he takes that down. It's a 3-play, 5-yard drive for the Kansas City Chiefs, capped off by the same exact route run, instead of by Kadarius Toney, this time by Sky Moore, where they bring him in a little motion and then have him basically do a flat right to the goal line of the end zone. Mahomes finds him, touchdown. Now the Philadelphia Eagles are trailing for the first time in the playoffs. They're trailing 35-27. I'm kind of lying, because they technically were trailing after that first touchdown by the Chiefs in the fourth quarter by 28-27. I'm a little bit of fabrication there. Apologies. But isn't that impressive? It took a team the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl to actually get the Philadelphia Eagles behind in points. So every game they played, they were never behind until moments, 12:04 in the fourth quarter. Truly impressive. Then the Eagles did respond, though. After Sky Moore gets his touchdown, Mahomes' third touchdown pass in the game, Eagles respond. They go 8 plays, 75 yards, leave it with 4:07 left, and they score. It's 35-35. Then we get a 12-play, 66-yard drive by the Chiefs. capped off by a controversial holding call on Juju Smith-Schuster. And who was it was James Bradbury or Bradbury. I think it's Bradbury. I think I typed that down wrong. But he reset. This is a third down. This is to essentially give the Eagles about a minute 20 left in the game. I know they had no timeouts at the time, but they'd been giving them about a minute and 20 left in the game. It was a third down play. I believe it was like 3rd and 8-ish. Mahomes doesn't get the pass. There was a hold on Juju Smith-Schuster, the intended receiver of that Mahomes pass. Obviously, everyone feels one way or the other about it. I come down that it was a hold. If it is a penalty, you need to call it. I get people say, let him play. It's a Super Bowl. You weren't calling that earlier. Who's to say that there were those holds to call? I just don't know. And if anything, it definitely wasn't the deciding factor, because that Nick Bolton fumble that was called back for the receiver not making a football move, well, that would have decided the game long ago. So that wasn't the deciding factor of this game, but it did help the Chiefs wind the clock down to, I believe, 8 seconds left. So it did essentially put the nail in the coffin. They kicked the field goal with Butler. And excuse me, is his name Butler? What's this dude's name? Let me look it up. I don't want to short shrift him. Yeah, Butker, not Butler, Butker. Harrison Butker. He kicks the field goal to win the game. Chiefs win the Super Bowl. I would have loved to see this thing go to overtime. I would have loved to see them kick that field goal. Philly be able to drive with about a minute 22 left, get themselves in field goal range, and have this thing go to overtime. To see an overtime Super Bowl, which I am pretty positive we've only seen once before, and I think that was the Patriots and maybe Falcons, not quite sure. It would have been awesome. Who doesn't want to see an overtime game in the Super Bowl? That would be sweet. That being said, though, it truly was an unbelievable game. Unbelievable teams. We will probably see this matchup again if I had to bet. I know the Eagles still have a couple of guys on the rookie contract, Hurts in particular. So once those things shake out in the next few years, you got to see, because there's no way some of the offensive pieces they have are going to be able to stick around long term. I assume who they build around is Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts. They just got dudes right there. A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, very good players. I would imagine they're going to do everything in their power to retain them, but as the years wane on, who knows? The Chiefs, on the other hand, their big dogs, Kelsey and Mahomes, are there. And so it'll be very fun to see. And people, I don't think, expecting them with the, departure of Tyreek Hill going to my Miami Dolphins, who balled out. I don't think a lot of people expected them to do what they did. They're a very good team. They got some guys that are going to be solid for a few more years here. Isaiah Pacheco, their stud running back now, or at least seemingly their stud running back, is a rookie. So he's going to have at least 3 more years on a rookie contract, and they can reap the rewards of that dude's talent, squeeze the juice out of that man while you got him. And Juju Smith-Schuster, he's pretty solid. He's really lucky to even be there. He's no, A.J. Brown, where he can draw himself some money, maybe a few years under Mahomes, sure. Kadarius Toney, still under a rookie contract. He seems to be pretty solid. Sky Moore's pretty solid. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Anybody you put that's even semi-decent with Mahomes, especially with Andy Reid as the play caller, they're going to be just fine. Just fine. He's like Tom Brady in that way. He might even surpass Tom Brady one day. But Mahomes is just the type of player where you give him a few good pieces. You give him one piece, like how Brady had Gronk, he's got Kelsey. You give him a few good pieces at the wide receiver, like a Julian Edelman, dudes that can just catch the ball consistently and run very solid routes. You got yourself a top-tier offense year in, year out. Jalen Hurts, he's going to be a stud for the time to come. He's got a good head on his shoulders. It looks like he knows exactly what the mission is, and he looks like a man possessed. He had a couple of mistakes this Super Bowl, that fumble being a big one where Nick Bolton returned it for a touchdown. But other than that, he was pretty much blemish-free. No, he did have 2 sacks, but he had no interceptions, just that one fumble, and then he had a total of 4 touchdowns on the game. 3 rushing, if I'm not mistaken, and then one passing. So the guy is a total stud. As long as he can stay healthy, same goes for Mahomes, same goes for all these players. He's going to be very good. It was an interesting thing, though. Like I said, one little stat I wanted to point out: the 2 other Super Bowls, because this was the 3rd most watched show in TV history. The only 2 Super Bowls that topped it was Super Bowl 49 in 2015, where it was the Pats and Seahawks, and then Super Bowl 51 in 2017 with the Pats and Falcons. So Tom Brady is the only guy that can be a bigger draw than Pat Mahomes, and that makes sense. I'm kind of surprised that the Mahomes and Brady Super Bowl, the Bucks Chiefs, didn't. It was probably in the top 10. Don't know exactly what that got, but it was pretty unreal. It was an unreal game. Like I said, I nailed the prediction 38-35 Chiefs, right on the money. If anyone wants to follow me, I don't know what that puts me in my playoff record. Pretty sure I'm well above 60% on my spreads, over and unders. Not quite sure. You're gonna have to take that all with a grain of salt. But I know, also Batman Cup, Dark Knight. This is the OG Batman Cup, by the way. This ain't Dark Knight. This is Michael Keaton Batman right here. But that being said, Reed also predicted the right score of this game. He had 34-31 Chiefs. He made it his lock of the week like there were any other games to be talking about, but it doesn't really matter. He actually got the right point differential, very close on the score itself, but he wasn't me. So it is what it is. There were other things going on over the weekend, though, in the world of sports. The one that I was most particular was the Waste Management Tour that featured the Coliseum, the loudest hole in golf. And that one was another good, honestly, that finished up right before the Super Bowl. And that was another really good tournament, realistically. Scotty Scheffler won it going back to back. He just crushed that course, 19 under par. Obviously, this isn't the hardest course that they're going to see in the year, but to go 19 under par anywhere is fantastic. The day capped off, too, with Ricky Fowler getting an ace, not on 16, which is that loudest hole in golf, the Coliseum, the par 3. It wasn't that, unfortunately. It was on, I think, 7 is where he hit the par 3 ace, hole in one, if you will. But it was a great thing. A great game. I mean, it is a game, but it was a great round. The Canadian Nick Taylor gave Scotty Scheffler, they were both paired in the final group along with John Rahm, gave him everything he wanted. It wasn't until around 16 that he made a little bit of a mistake on 16 where he didn't make his par putt, if I'm not mistaken. And Scheffler got himself out of a jam and did par that hole. That's what gave Scheffler the advantage to really sail smoothly through 17 and 18 and take it home. And he won himself, I believe, $3.6 million. So good for him. There were also some good things. Justin Thomas surged that final round. I'm pretty sure he put in a round that was like, he ended up being 4th with 13 under, just behind Scheffler, Taylor, and Rahm. Those guys finished 1, 2, and 3 in the reverse order. And so he came in. Justin Day played really well. He came in for 5th. Jordan Spieth, who is my guy, my favorite guy, he was in the hunt, ended up being 11 under, started the day at 11 under. He basically had an even round. I just pray one day that guy can get it together, because when he was rolling in 2015, 2016, it was fun. It truly was fun. So it was a good day. Jason Day was impressive. Like I said earlier, Ricky Fowler, he didn't have himself a bad day. I'm trying to see where he finished tied for 10th at 10 under. So he didn't have a bad day either. It was a good round of golf, good tournament. I enjoyed every second of it. We have the Genesis Invitational, if I'm not mistaken, that starts this week. It started today, actually. Max Homa, I'm looking at it right now. Max Homa is leading it with Kevin Mitchell. They're both tied for first at 7 under. Look at my boy John Rahm. He's there at 6, just balling. This one is happening in Riviera Country Club in Pacific Palisades, California. The big thing, and this is another $20 million purse. So in theory, another $3.6 million if you can win it. But the big news about this one is that Tiger Woods is making his return to the PGA this season. Obviously, he had that wreck a couple of years ago. His back has been beaten and bruised. If you don't like Tiger Woods in the game of golf, well, you just don't like golf, clearly. And there's plenty of people out there who don't. So God bless you. But Tiger Woods is so needed in the game of golf. He's utterly, besides Jack Nicklaus, he is the greatest golfer of all time. And so, I just want to make sure because I always, yeah, good. Jack Nicklaus. I always get Jack Nicholson and Nicholas confused. And quite honestly, they were both really famous around the same time frame. The Golden Bear, though, is Jack Nicklaus. I wanted to make sure I got that right because I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't, because he is the only guy to even be able to, hold Tiger Woods' jockstrap, if you will. Maybe Tiger Woods holds his because he's probably, unless Tiger Woods has some miraculous, stem cell treatment or something in his back, he probably won't surpass Jack's 18 majors. I would personally like to see it because Tiger Woods at his heyday, if he never had his divorce, never had his wreck, probably comfortably passes Jack. I think Tiger at his best and Jack at his best, if you could somehow make that happen in a time machine, that would, especially giving Jack modern clubs, that would be something to watch. But I think Tiger would probably pull it out because Tiger's got a mentality that I don't think any other golfer has ever had besides potentially Jack Nicklaus. That said, though, Genesis is happening. We have some other big stuff happening in the sports world. Genesis is happening. If you're still a fan of football, want more football, the XFL, which I didn't realize was still a thing until yesterday, is having 4 games being played this weekend. There's also time for racing, baby. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing. We got the Daytona 500, essentially the Super Bowl of NASCAR, happening this weekend, Sunday, 2:30 is when it starts. I know nothing about NASCAR besides the cars go fast, and I'm hoping that it's a semi-respectable race. And I do know that the last 50 laps are it's basically this: first 50, last 50. Those are what you want to tune in for on the Daytona 500 if you're not a real racing fan. First 50 are always good. Last 50 are always better because unfortunately, or fortunately, that's when you start seeing people pushing, getting a little more aggressive out there, maybe causing a little bit of wrecks. But a gentleman named Alex Bowman is the one sitting in pole position in that Daytona 500. There's going to be 42 drivers in the field. And the one that I wanted to bring up, because in my childhood, X Games was massive, right? X Games was massive, and I don't know if there was anyone bigger, potentially Tony Hawk or Sean, what's his face? Why the redhead? I cannot think of his name. Sean White. Good Lord, there you go. And pretty obvious for his skin color too. That dude was very pale. Besides those two, I don't know if there's any other X Game guy bigger than my boy Travis Pastrana. And Travis Pastrana, let me bring this up, is in the field of the Daytona 500. Him and this gentleman to our right here, maybe your left. I don't know how it comes up, but I'm going to say the right because it is my right. Jimmy Johnson, I believe 3-time Daytona 500 champion. Those two were back in action. Travis, obviously, in his very first action. But I just remember when he did the double backflip in X Games. I remember when I think he was the first one to really pull off. I think it was like the Superman deal. He had so many cool things that he was doing. Obviously, Nitro Circus was a sweet show. How this guy's even alive. He's 39 years old. He probably has the body of a 66-year-old or maybe even a 76-year-old. He's probably got arthritis, but he's going to be in the race, and I'm interested to see just how he finishes up. I'm pretty sure he's going to be in the back of the pack, but he's going to draw some eyeballs. What I did enjoy is I like his suit here that you can see, his Black Rifle Coffee. Haven't had Black Rifle Coffee until semi-recently. Not too bad. Not too bad, Black Rifle. If you want to sponsor the show, happy to do it. Love the vets, love coffee, love rifles. So checking off the boxes give us a shout. Always on. We'll be always on Black Rifle Coffee if you let us. But that being said, I thought this jumpsuit, driver suit, not quite sure what they call these things. This one looks pretty badass. Jimmy Johnson's got the old Carvana, it's his typical blue. He's by far and away the best driver in the recent history of NASCAR, maybe one of the best ever. And he has not been in NASCAR recently. He's actually been in the IndyCar series, which for those of you who care about racing, you probably know F1 over in Europe. It's essentially the American version of F1. It's just a little more standardized. It's not as much customization to it, but it's the same in principle as F1. I say that in principle, but anyone who probably knows racing say, no, they're so much different. In layman's principle, they're essentially the same thing. But those two are the very big notables, and they're not even in pole position. Besides like Joey Logano and a couple other names, if you were to tell them to me, I don't really know anything about this racing, but I do like watching this race and then the Indy 500. Those are the races I enjoy. Don't really care about any other type of racing. I love cars, don't care about these races. I don't even love cars enough that I know that much about them. But it's going to be interesting to see who wins. If you have any suggestions or guesses, let us know in the comments below. But that said, the thing I'm very interested in and what I really am just waiting for, besides March Madness, which is coming around the corner, I've lost a little bit of interest in March Madness as Florida is more than likely not going to be in the tournament this year. They may make the NIT, but hopefully we have brighter skies for Florida in the future. I think Todd Golden's going to be good. Irregardless, that's right around the corner. I always enjoy the first couple of weekends of the tournament. I don't know if there's anything purely better in sports than the first 2 weekends of the tournament. But what's happening now is the MLB spring training. That is officially starting February 24th with the Rangers-Royals spring training game and the Mariners-Padres. I'm interested in just to see those rules that we're going to be seeing, the bigger bases, pitch clock, and the limited shifting is all going to take effect starting spring training. I'm interested to see how it goes. I obviously am curious to see how the Braves do in replacing good Lord Dansby Swanson, because I had Grisham in my mind. He's going to be hopefully taking over at shortstop. Going to have all Ozzy Albies back. Dear Lord. And then there's going to be big moves. The Rangers picked up the Texas Rangers picked up Jacob deGrom. Obviously, you have the Yankees signing back Aaron Judge. So there's a lot of big things going on. It looks like the Mets and Phillies, the NL East is going to be ridiculous this year. It was pretty good last year. It's going to be even better this year with the race and showdown that's going to be happening against the Mets, Phillies, and Braves. I am going to be resubscribing to the MLB TV just so I can see every Braves game, because I am going to be enthralled in this entire season. Braves have one of the best pitching staffs in the game. There's a lot of new faces in different places. Padres are going to be solid again. The Royals should be okay this year. So that officially starts February 24th. Watch those games in either the Cactus League out there in Arizona or the Grapefruit League down here in Florida. If you can go catch any of them, please do. I don't even know who my local team is anymore. It used to be the Pittsburgh Pirates down there in old Bradenton. And the Braves used to be over here in Orlando, but now they aren't, since the wide world of sports isn't the same or even there anymore. How much I know about Disney goes to show. So it's going to be fun. I know that pitchers and catchers have already reported. I'm pretty sure players, good Lord, it's, February 16th. They got to be getting there soon. So the actual ball players, the day-to-day guys, they're probably getting there as well. So we still have a bunch of stuff coming up in the sporting world. We're going to be talking about that a lot. As we transition out of football, we're going to be talking about XFL and its developments, talking about college basketball as it winds itself down, talking about baseball as it winds itself up. And hopefully it'll be a good summer and spring for everyone involved here at Always On, because we're always going to be on the topic of sports, and we're also always going to be on top of the topics just rolling on around the world. And with that said, there's some stuff going on in the United States, if you haven't noticed. Some presidential stuff, some political stuff, some business stuff. And the political side, at least in the United States, and some, I don't want to say pandemic stuff, but Chernobyl type stuff, maybe. Not good. Not good at all. But let's get it off a little. Let's ease on into the news. Ease on into it. We have a little bit of news making waves in the Republican potential presidential in the presidential election of 2024, the Republican primary. The hopefuls are obviously, we have Donald Trump over there, the former president, trying to regain his title. And we have Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, UN ambassador in the Trump administration. She is actually officially thrown her hat into the ring. I believe it was as of today, maybe yesterday. She had an announcement video that came out February 14th by my likes. And just to be completely honest, I am a conservative. I am a registered Republican. Of the two that are officially announced, I would much rather have her. I have not voted Republican, at least at a presidential level, in 2 consecutive elections, just because I cannot bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. Irregardless, it basically just goes to show, now that the first domino has fallen, who else is going to be in the presidential race here on the Republican side? Democrats seem content with Biden, unless there's some sort of health scare. We'll see. It doesn't even seem like they have that deep of a bench. Unfortunately, they got Jim Jeffries over there. They have obviously Kamala Harris, who, let's just be honest, I think Trump could beat Kamala Harris. God bless her. I wouldn't vote for either, but I could see that happening. She's no hot shakes. The Republicans currently at the moment have a deeper bench, even though the base may not be smart enough to recognize that and vote a loser in again. For our candidate. But now that first domino has fallen with Haley, who's going to be next? I think everyone's really sort of waiting to see when and if Ron DeSantis, my governor down here in Florida, who would probably be my favorite from a betting perspective, and just who I would like to see win, because I think if Trump had any good policies, DeSantis has the best job of melding them with traditional conservatism, where I lie. And making the best of, soup that's got shit in it. So that said, I think when people look at Ron DeSantis, he seems to be the guy that's going to be the flag bearer coming forward. But this could be a repeat, fellas and ladies, of 2016, at least in the presidential Republican primary, where you have, I think they had 16 candidates. We may have that same thing. So there's rumors of, I believe he's New Hampshire's governor, Chris Sununu, the former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, I believe his name is. Those two might run. Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, might run. The guy who makes me look skinny, Chris Christie. He might have Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, running. I don't see him not running. That dude is a succubus for power. So he will probably end up running. It could be a pretty wide. Oh, Tim Scott from South Carolina, a senator over there. Rumors that he may run. I think just those names I rattled off would probably bring it around to 6 or 7 people. God willing. The Republican Party can do what the Democrats did with Bernie Sanders this time around. Rally around a particular person, whether that be Haley, Scott, Cruz, DeSantis, and shove out the guy who doesn't deserve to be there, at least by a lot of conservatives who are in my side of the aisle, for lack of a better word. That is Donald Trump. That is what the Democrats did with Bernie Sanders. They just cut him off at the kneecaps, and I think they saw what happened with Trump, right? They saw that if you don't nip this stuff in the bud and rally around a guy who can actually win the nomination within your party, you're going to get left with the craziest dude in the room. The Republicans didn't do that quick enough. We got left with the craziest dude in the room. I hope this time around the Republicans can not be so stupid, but let's be honest, politicians and politics in general is pretty stupid, as sad as it is. As much as I would love for them all to be competent, they're typically not. So that was the big news as far as political news, there was another big thing that Dianne Feinstein, the California senator, is retiring after this term. Her term is up, which I believe is 2024. She is 89 years old. Why she hasn't retired before, I guess I don't know. We're looking at septuagenarians and octogenarians who just will not relinquish power because we have a president right now who's in his 80s and wants to run again. And I believe he'd be 86 if he were to win it before his presidential term is over, maybe even 87. Why people want to run this long, and Dianne Feinstein is in the same boat mentally as Joe Biden, not quite there. So that's neither here nor there. She has been serving, though, since 1992, has been a representative of the state of California for quite some time. I believe she's been a senator that entire time. So that goes to show that she's pretty savvy politically. But if you've ever seen her speak, she can get through it because she's essentially on a script, but she's not on there. She's 89 years old, for God's sake. She's probably, for an 89-year-old, pretty mentally cognizant. But at 89 years old, you're 89 years old. For all I pray I get to be as healthy as her at 89 years old. It's no, I'm not trying to poo-poo her for being 89, but at a certain point, you gotta know when to call it quits. I think the Democrats are finding that out with another one of their senatorial candidates, the dude from Pennsylvania, Fetterman, I think his name was, and he checked himself into I think John Hopkins or whatever for being mentally depressed. It's all just sad. American politics right now, and American culture is a little bit sad at the moment. Indifferent and not necessarily brighter news. I don't know. We'll see. The person that heads up the company you are hopefully watching this on YouTube, Suzanne, I'm gonna potentially botch her last name, Wojcicki. It's a Polish last name. Wojcicki. Don't know. Hopefully one of those two. She is stepping down after nearly 10 years at the helm of YouTube, and she is going to be replaced by the new CEO, Neil Homan, or Mohan, I believe. Hohan? Did I say Hohan? Whatever. I believe it's Neil Mohan, Mohan. He was basically a subsidiary position from her. I don't have it in front of me, and I truly don't really care. Maybe I can bring this up, and we can look together. How about we do that? How about I share? How about I show and tell? Let's do that. Let's see if we can't do that. Because it does say here. So, yep, once you see it, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki is stepping down after nearly a decade in the role. That is her, for those of you who never have seen her. And then this, Neil Mohan, is going to be her replacement. He, if I'm not mistaken, is going to show us here. He was the chief product officer at YouTube. And according to a blog post, this change is effective immediately. Wow. Very quick. As you can tell, maybe the world didn't like that news, as Alphabet and Google stock is down 1.36%. Does that really mean anything? Not so much. I did see something here, though, that the leadership change follows a drop in YouTube's advertising revenue. And as the video platform began emphasizing subscription packages on YouTube TV, ad revenue fell 7.8% in the fourth quarter of last year from the same period in 2021. And that was the second straight decline, following a third quarter drop, obviously, in 2022. I don't know what that says about her governing record, her, execution of being the chief officer of YouTube. I think she did a fine job. I personally am a YouTube junkie. I do have a premium subscription to YouTube. That's essentially my version of cable these days. I find YouTube very informative, very fun. Why I'm doing this show on YouTube, because I think it's the best platform to get your points across, to reach people who want to be reached, and hopefully have fun conversations that are enjoyable, whether it be about sports, politics, business, money, anything you want to talk about, you can have on YouTube for the most part. Obviously, pornography and maybe, if you believe some of the very conservative pundits out there, certain controversial topics that we're not going to touch tonight. Maybe one day, but not tonight. So that's some news there on the YouTube change of the guard, if you will. Then let's get into some world news because there's some stuff going on around the world. Let's just touch base back again on that massive earthquake that happened last week in Turkey and Syria, right there on the border. That death toll is now up to 40,000 plus people, 35,000 plus in Turkey, 5,800 in Syria. And I think they have that divided between rebel controlled territory and government controlled territory because, as you may or may not know, because the thing's been going on for about a decade now, Bashar al-Assad, I believe it's a royal family in Syria, has essentially, who's backed by the Russians, we're backing the rebels, yada, yada, yada. Don't need to get into that. They've basically been in a civil war for quite some time now. So that's why you see that deviation. What was a fun fact, if you want to call it fun, more of a terrifying fact, realistically, is that there were over 1,100 aftershocks, 1,117 to be exact, detected by the Turkish authorities after, I believe, the two major quakes came through. Maybe those two are in that number, but that's a lot of tremors. That's clearly some tectonic plates just, and all that is just it's not a big like motion. It's just a little, and it causes that much catastrophe. There's obviously been a lot of news going around that some of these buildings along those regions and Turkey specifically were touted to be earthquake. I don't know if anything's necessarily earthquake proof, but earthquake resistant at magnitudes, because this was a 7.8, I believe, at magnitudes that should have withheld. Goes to show that maybe it's corruption, maybe it's something else, maybe just bad engineering. I don't know. It's probably, you can check off probably a lot of boxes as to why it happened the way it happened. But there was an apartment building that was featured in I believe, a New York Times article that was completely destroyed, killing around 1,000 people, if I'm not mistaken, within that building, just being collapsed under the debris. That was touted as one of these earthquake-proof buildings or facilities that was supposed to be, a headliner into the rejuvenation, the upcomings, or coming out, the flying of their feathers. I don't know, however you want to say it, rising from the ashes like a phoenix of what was once a very proud nation, empire in Turkey. Apparently, that's maybe not so much the case. It does make you hope that out in California, in the Northeast, which is very earthquake prone, that something like this never comes to fruition out there, where things that are earthquake proof turn out to be not. I don't think so. If I had a hunch, there's a lot of regulation out there in California, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So I don't foresee that being a case, and God forbid it ever happens, because I don't want it to, obviously. I might be on the right side of the aisle, but I'm not like, oh, Californians need to die. And I think California is badly run state, but I would never wish that upon anybody, which is sad that it even needs to be mentioned. But these times are polarizing, and unfortunately, people don't necessarily like to blur the lines between just Americans and people who are against their team. But that leads to other world news, where did the U.S., and I want to share this. I hope that there's more reporting on this, but a gentleman named Seymour Hersh, if I'm not mistaken, alleges that the White House and the CIA worked with Norway and I believe Denmark to bomb the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which were bringing natural gas from Russia over to Germany. And they were, you can't say transatlantic, I think it's the Baltic or the North Sea up there. They were basically transiting those seas, going into Germany as sort of the hub to get natural gas, or at least a large majority of natural gas into Europe. And apparently, as this gentleman claims, the U.S. is directly responsible for that. And so I want to bring this up here because I just want to show you this graphic. As they apparently say, is the U.S. carried this out under, obviously, and as you can see here in this first little graphic, I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Well, as you see this first graphic, if you can see my cursor, that red stuff, that's going to be at the very northern part of that little graphic. Those are the pipelines in question. But needless to say, let's get to this very interesting nugget. So this is apparently how the U.S. Carried out the attacks. So what they did is in June 22nd, U.S. Navy divers, under the guise of a military drill we are performing with our NATO allies in the area, U.S. Navy divers planted remote-controlled C4, which is a plastic explosive, onto these pipelines. Then, in September 22nd, now let's just remember, in 2022, that's when this whole invasion started. The whole invasion truly started, if I'm not mistaken, in late February, early March. So this is several months after the invasion from Russia into Ukraine. Then on September 22nd, or excuse me, 26th of 2022, Norwegian surveillance planes dropped sonar buoys onto the surface of the Baltic Sea. So it's the Baltic Sea that these were in, not the North Sea. And so you guys know, apparently what was happening is these buoys were going to send out a sequence of unique low-frequency tonal signals to then trigger these sensors on the C4 and detonate those explosives. Obviously, if this is even remotely true, that is a massive internet. You can see it a couple ways. You can see it as a direct declaration of war against Russia. At least an attack like this to critical infrastructure can be seen that way. And it can also be seen as an attack against our own NATO ally, Germany. And that is also sort of a declaration of war, if you will. I mean, if somebody tried to bomb our natural gas pipelines, that's exactly what we would consider it as being, whether it be Canada or someone of the like. The estimate is, I believe, somewhere in the range of $300 to $500 million in damage to those pipelines. Hirsch has obviously had a pretty good reputation. I'm trying to look at it here. He has a pretty good reputation for being semi-accurate. It's just hard, because I want to believe that the U.S., at least if they did it with the approval of the Germans, just so they can take that flack. If we worked with Denmark and Norway under the guy, and I'm assuming the British up this too. I think that's alluded to in this article as well. I mean, us and the British, we're boys, so we're not going to do many things without them. They're not going to do many things without us. So that being said, I wanted to see, because they say, I believe it's the My Lai massacre is sort of the big, hey, Seymour Hersh, the guy who reported this, because of course it's all alleged until truly proven. This is the big feather in this gentleman's cap, is that he ended up being right about I don't know if you'd call it a massacre in the grand scheme of war crimes, but it was definitely nothing very good. The My Lai massacre in Vietnam, where I believe essentially U.S. servicemen, I think it was in Cambodia where it happened, but they essentially killed like 100 people. Is that a war crime? Yes. But in the grand scheme of how wars in Asia have been fought, is it the worst thing to ever happen? To be just completely blunt, not even close. Just go look at what Japan did in Nanking in the early 30s. Doesn't excuse what our troops do. I think we have to hold our troops to a very, very high standard. We are a country that espouses liberty, freedom, equality the world over. So I think all those things need to come out. It doesn't justify anything, but it does go to show that Hirsch has a respectable record in that regard. I'm trying to find it here because he has had some missteps in the past, and I think this article does a little bit of a rundown of what it was. And I'm just trying to see. Of course, Russia comes out and blames the U.S., says we did it. No duh, right? And the White House and the CIA say it's a bold-faced lie. Of course, both parties are saying that. Makes sense. If I were the Russians, I would do the exact same thing. And if I were the U.S. and I didn't want this getting out, I would do the exact same thing too. So that said, it's something that's obviously going to have to develop. And here we go. It says Hirsch is a former New York Times and New Yorker reporter who has won Pulitzer Prizes, and he was involved in also a 2004, of course, I said the Vietnam massacre thing. And then and investigative journalism about Abu Ghraib scandal. I just butchered that. I apologize. In 2004, following the U.S. invasion of Iraq, I have no idea what that one's about. But more recently, he ignited controversy with a report disputing the Obama administration's version of the 2011 killing of Al Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden in a U.S. special. Okay, so he basically said, I'm assuming that we didn't kill Osama the way that the White House says we did. I don't know if I buy that, but it is a little suspicious that we've never released footage of that guy. Like, I don't care what he looked like. Let us see that dead man's face. Neither here nor there. So there's some things that he's apparently hit on, some things he's probably missed on. It's going to be interesting. When it comes to motives, it does sort of make sense that the U.S. would do that. There's apparently a little clip of Biden going around. I believe it's in early February before the invasion even started, saying sort of off the cuff that Nord Stream 2 or the Nord Stream pipeline would be gone if Russia invaded Ukraine, which obviously they inevitably did. So it kind of seems, if you want to draw lines, it kind of seems like that makes sense. Other than that, no one really knows. You could see a reason for Russia to do it, to obviously make a acute energy crisis even more acute in Europe. You could also just say, why not just shut it off? But you never know. When it comes to war and things of that nature, $500 million in damages is kind of a drop in the bucket. Let's be honest. We've sent the Ukrainians ourselves. I believe it's now we've allotted $70 billion, sent them like 40 or 50 billion. So 100 million ain't much. It's going to be interesting. I hope in time we get to actually figure it out. I hope that the Germans, and there's a lot in the, I want to say Bundesliga, but that's not the name of their parliament. That's the name of their like premier soccer league. In their version of Congress, there is seemingly some interest into investigate it further. They have done investigations into this in the recent past. Nothing that came up saying it definitively proved the U.S. or definitively proved that Russia did it. Who knows? Obviously, Ukraine could have done it in some capacity. I mean, if C4 is all you needed, you could totally see Ukrainians being able to pull that off. Who knows? I think it would make sense. I'm not cynical enough about the U.S. at this point in my life, at least, to say that they did it. And if they did do it, I think the justification from Biden, I mean, we've had concerns about it. If Europe didn't have such a resilience, or excuse me, a reliance on Russian energy like the way that they did, would this even have happened in Ukraine? Would Putin have thought he had the leverage over the West to be able to do it? Who knows? These are things that you can Monday morning quarterback all day long. It'd be interesting to see what comes out. And if the U.S. ended up doing it, it does stink if they did it without the coordination of the Germans. Maybe they did, and they're just going to take the blame, wear those stripes on their back. So we'll see how it all goes. Hopefully this opens up a little bit of a can of worms that leads to, more investigations. Speaking of a can of worms, I wanted to circle back on some U.S. news because I didn't touch on this. We have going on in East Palestine, Ohio, a little bit, you can't really call it a natural disaster. I believe it would be just a man-made disaster, potentially a little bit of a crisis going on there, where a train derailed. I believe it was around a 35, 37 car train derailed outside of or inside of East Palestine, and there were 5 cars full of, let me get the exact verbiage here of what this was, because I don't want to short shrift the chemical, because it was not good. It was a chemical that's essentially made to make plastics, PVC. So if I'm not mistaken, it's some kind of chloride type chemical. Give me a second here. I'm doing this, so it's not exactly Jeopardy. But it was coming from Pittsburgh, heading to Ohio. There were a total of 38 cars, and this was a train under the auspices of the Norfolk Southern Rail train. And It looks like, da-ba-da-ba-ba-da. Yeah, it just says hazardous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which is used in making plastics. Apparently, from what I've seen, this vinyl chloride um, essentially boils at room temperature. So it's a very flammable uh, liquid. And so what the government decided to do between, I believe, Pennsylvania, the EPA, and the state of Ohio, they've decided to burn most of the, if not all, of those chemicals that were leaking out of these. I believe it was 5 containers that had this vinyl chloride that they were burning. It has since caused, if you haven't seen the pictures, they're pretty insane. I can probably uh, find it real quick here. Here, let me share this with you. Let me show you this story. Just in case you haven't seen it, you can take a gander at it. It's pretty gnarly. Um, Here, oh, of course, it's going to do it like that. There, you can see what the cloud looks like a little bit, but let me get you a better picture. I, of course, clicked on Twitter, and then it takes you to Twitter itself, and I can't share Twitter itself like that. I got to reshare it. And here you can see what this cloud looks like. It's pretty nasty. You can see it from space where it's essentially just a little plume of just dark blackness, nastiness. I believe they cleared out a 5 mile or 2 mile radius saying, hey, anyone within that, you got to get the heck out of there because the air here is not going to be good for at least a few days. I don't know exactly why this was considered the best move. I'm assuming it was the most cost effective. I don't quite know, especially when you're dealing with hazardous chemicals that have a chance of exploding. You want to take care of it as quickly and efficiently as possible. This may have just been the best option. That said, there's been a lot of just commotion going on, I think deservedly so, of why this was the best. Apparently, according in here on that same picture that I just showed you, was a post from the EPA of the Great Lakes. EPA is the federal office called the Environmental Protection Agency. And they said they are monitoring the air quality in East Palestine. And during yesterday's controlled burn at the derailment site, they don't have any effect of chemical contaminants in the area. You may smell an odor miles away from the site. However, it's not considered hazardous. How true that is, no one knows. I do like that there's at least transparency. That is good. We need to be as transparent as possible in moments like this because that's what separates us from the commies. And it's good that people are able to bitch and moan about it because instead of shutting it down like a Chernobyl type incident or like COVID, people get to complain. And I hope that these complaints get to people to dig deep about what happened here and fix problems. If you don't complain about these sorts of things, you know, the greasy wheel, the squeaky wheel gets no grease. So I'm hoping that whether it be refinements in the EPA system, refinements in how railroads are operated, that's something that can be situated. Apparently, there was a report today that another train outside of Detroit that was carrying hazard chemicals derailed. A fun fact that's come up, or a fun stat that's come up, is that there's apparently over 1,000 derailments a year in the United States alone. I would only imagine that's incredibly high for relative to trains around the rest of the world. I just think to myself, in Japan, I'm pretty sure I heard a stat somewhere where the high-speed trains in Japan haven't had a derailment since like the 90s. So it's pretty abysmal to me that we don't have trains and train tracks that are carrying hazardous chemicals that are derailing at a rate of 1,000 on average per year. That's insane to me. So hopefully this is something that we can get fixed with this massive infrastructure spending bill that we passed, or the Biden passed last year. Hopefully that can get some of this infrastructure on the trains, whether it be the cars, the tracks, whatever. We can get to the bottom of what causes these derailments, and hopefully some good can come out of this. There's been some, political fodder for Republicans, especially. You had J.D. Vance, the, I guess, newly elected senator from the state of Ohio, doing, in all intents and purposes, what he should be doing, making a stink about something that's happening in his backyard to his constituents. He was sitting there at a river, more of a creek, realistically, outside of East Palestine. Not sure how far away he was. I believe it was within a 5 mile radius, maybe 10, where you can see him just taking a stick and scratching the surface of this creek. And it was pretty disgusting. The fluids from or the chemicals, it almost looks like when you put gas in water, or you see that like if it's a rainy day at a gas station where you can sort of see the gas chemicals inside like a puddle of water. That's exactly what it looked like. It was gross. There's obviously been in streams a lot of dead fish coming up. It's an ecological disaster potentially brewing. So I hope that this can refine processes and how you and what dictates how you proceed and things like this in the near future. Otherwise, though, it seems like these burns are going to keep happening. I think that's just the way they believe is the best way to treat this at the moment. I don't know enough or am educated enough on the subject to say if that's right, wrong, or indifferent. But I do just want to say we're thinking about you out there, East Palestine. I think a lot of people in politics hopefully will be looking into these situations and not just brush it under the rug and hope it doesn't happen again, because I think you need to keep shouting about these things, keep the people like the EPA, the Norfolk Sunshine Rail, or whatever the hell they're called, accountable, and just make a stink of it, because it's something that you can't have happen. I'm trying to get the name of the company again here. That's Norfolk something. Why people? Why does this always have to happen when I want to find it 5 seconds from now? But irregardless, Norfolk Southern. Norfolk Southern. Keep those people accountable, because these are types of things that in the 21st century shouldn't be happening, at least to the extent that they are. Irregardless of this incident, 1,000 derailments a year just seems a little much. Seems a little much. That being said, though, let's end on some good news here, because if you didn't know, Barney is back. I love you. You love me. We're what is it? Great big family with a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too? So that said, Barney's back. I want to bring up the new Barney. I don't know if I like him. I mean, I don't care. But apparently Barney's going to have his own movie and everything. This is the new Barney here. Barney's back with a reboot and a new look. Boom. Good old Barnes. That is what Barney looks like now. Let's stop the sharing here and let's show you the comparison of the old Barney. Because, I mean, this is nostalgia for me, right? I grew up with a little bit of Barney. So I kind of like the old Barney better. But here's the new Barney. You'll see it here in a second. Here's new Barney. I will say he does look a little more reptilian here, right? He's got a little gap tooth, but he's got a little more reptile to him. He looks more like a dinosaur. And then here's old Barney, the classic. The classic. Barney, the badass dinosaur. Oh, look at that guy. He was so cute. Either way, Barney's back. He's coming out with a feature film in 2024. Look out for that. I probably won't watch it, but maybe if you have kids, or God forbid, it's 2023. If I have a kid by 2024, you're damn right we're going to see it. I don't think I will. I don't even have a girlfriend. So that said, he's back. Barney's good. I want to see if there's any more good news out there. At the moment, there's a lucky lady. I believe it was a lady. I'm not quite sure. A lucky winner of $754 million in a Powerball at Washington State. This is now a week or so old. Wish I were that person. Even if half of it goes to Uncle Sam, I would love to be the winner of roughly $350 million. I could do a lot of good with that. I think everybody could. We'll definitely have a lot of fun with it as well. That being said, though, we're going to sign off here from Always On. Thoughts and prayers are still with the Carter family and Mr. Carter himself. Hopefully, we'll get Reed back here next week. Bigger, better, badder than ever. I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. There's a lot of good stuff. Daytona 500 is coming up. XFL is coming up. There's obviously college basketball and NBA. If you care about the NBA, don't care. But college basketball is still going. And we have MLB right around the corner, March Madness right around the corner. Even the USFL is coming in the summer. So that being said, we're going to sign off here. Thank you for joining another solo chat with Chase. I bid you all an adieu, a farewell.